Hello, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Pale. I'm your host, Nate Pale. Today's guest, I have Hunter Burney from Nashville, and he's with Katalyst.
Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Peo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Pale. I'm your host, Nate Pale. Today's guest, I have Hunter Burney from Nashville, correct? Nashville?
Yes.
And he's with Katalyst. Hunter's somebody I met off of, go figure, LinkedIn, which seems to be the place where everybody's connecting digitally when you're not able to meet locally. It seems like a great place to get connected through conversations, through liking other people's posts, and just all of a sudden you find out you have something in common, you have a little connection, and then you have a chat and you said, hey, let's do this. And Hunter was gracious enough to come on my podcast here, and he's got some cool stuff going, a lot of knowledge in this space where you are an individual contributor. You've gone through your career kind of being somebody that's a doer. You're an individual producer. You're creating product, I guess, in some sort of sense of the business world, and you've done a good enough job that management's taken notice of you, and they've said, hey, we're going to promote you to management. And anybody that's been in that space before knows that when you go from in control of what you can do and what you can produce to being in control of what others can do and what others can produce, there's this like massive learning curve of kind of giving up the reins to somebody else, stepping back and saying, I know I can maybe do it faster. I can do it quicker. I don't have time to show you. And how do you step out of that role, become an effective manager, and learn like, hey, now I'm not so much as the doer, I'm a manager. Now I got to figure out how to deal with different personality types, different levels of skill, different backgrounds, different all kinds of everything, to get them all kind of going in the same path and being successful and trying to pull the best out of all of them. You kind of become this internal coach. So Hunter, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. Good. Doing well. Thank you for having me.
Cool. So I kind of just went into the introduction of how you are, what you're up to, but yeah, there must be a story in your own history to say, hey, look, I was in that spot as somebody else. What made you kind of think, hey, I want to be in a place where I could share this knowledge of what I've learned and help others achieve success?
Broadly speaking, the context for the passion and the heart behind where I'm at currently is I went through a accelerated leadership development program out of college. I was an industrial engineer by education, and that foundation in industrial engineering is kind of unique in a way because it's very people focused as opposed to other disciplines. And so I think I kind of had that foundation alongside the technical stuff, went into manufacturing and into the leadership development program. And very quickly, this awareness and just perspective started to develop around, you can know everything. You can design the perfect widget or the perfect process or whatever, but it's the people and it's the management of the people and it's the influence of the people and the team to actually get the customer or whatever the objective is to get that done. And so I kind of went through this immersion in getting to know the perspective of my team members and the hourly employees, and was fortunate to go pretty quickly into some challenging management positions in one of the most challenging plants that the company I was with had. So, and then I went from a Fortune 500 company to a small custom manufacturing family-owned business, and a lot of things were night and day. And so I had a lot of quick learning to do and adapting to do. And even then, I could some of the same challenges. It just looked different, right? It was just different people. There was more freedom in making the change because it was small business versus corporation. But there were also less resources. There was a little bit less experience, and so it had its own challenges. And so that quickly made me question some of the things the assumptions I had made in trying to coach a team in a large corporation, a large setting. So I think I'm answering your question, but that's really just going through such a drastic change, and along the way actually seeing people really kind of gravitate towards the way I operate and what I believe in, and at the end of the day, I don't know that I have a good one-liner to sum up my philosophy, but I've always just focused on what can I do to empower and equip my team, and then get out of the way. My job is to remove obstacles and set them up for success. So what does that look like? How do I do that effectively? And that's led me to, the podcast, Katalyst. And that essentially is, it's about taking action. It's about being a force that energizes and empowers people and teams and organizations to take probably what they already have and what they already need, and just kind of have that confidence and have that bias for action to make the change or achieve whatever it is.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of times people have this misconception that the manager is there to give direct orders and encourage people to get more out of them and just grind it. There's movies of or sports figures. It's just this person that's just this hard charging force. But in reality, it's so much more about, like you said, the people. Everybody's unique. Everybody's different. Everybody's from a different background. A lot of times when you get placed into management, you inherit people that you may or may not have selected to be on your team to begin with, but you have these people. So you have to understand, okay, this person responds this well to criticism. This person responds better to being shown. This person responds better to being told. This person, everybody's got so many different ways of learning, and you come into this position as a doer or as a, I guess, individual contributor, and you go, okay, this is how I learn. This is how I figure out my way of doing my job the most effective way. This is the habits I go through. And all of a sudden you're managing people and everybody's doing it slightly different to drastically different than the way you're doing. But at the end of the day, they're still getting the job done. They're still getting together. And now as a manager, your role is just kind of all right, how can I get all these different team members to work cohesively and working more efficiently towards the same goal? They're on the same page, and you're managing, different, maybe somebody had a bad day last night or a bad day yesterday, and they're upset today. So how do you kind of get them, focused on what they're after? Or somebody's thinking about, a vacation coming up and mind's not in it. So it's constantly just playing this game of managing personalities, keeping people happy, keeping people focused. So I think what you're doing with Katalyst and the idea behind it is really a good idea, because there's not a lot of hands-on experience making that role change. There's hey, read this book, or I take a course. It's not really that simple. It's a lot of it is, as much as you don't want it to be, it's kind of you got to get your hands dirty. You got to find your way of doing it, your role, your voice, and trial and error, and try to get people motivated and rallied up behind you.
Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes, those individuals have good relationships with the other team members, right? If you're an individual contributor and you've been on a team for some period of time, right? You typically don't get promoted as like the guy who's been here a week and doesn't know anything about a process or a product or something like that. So you have to learn very quickly how to manage those in a professional way and separate personal from professional. So there's that aspect, but I'm kind of also to what you're saying, like you've got different personalities in a group, which is very natural, and you don't want them all to be the same by any means. But there's also different situations, right? Where as a leader, you can't always be hands off. I mean, maybe that's the default state for your style. But I mean, yeah, there absolutely are instances where you have to be directive. Like if the building's on fire, you don't want to like put it up for a vote to your team or whether you run outside or not, right? I mean, you tell everybody to get outside or whatever. But
and that's the job of a leader, is to know like when it's hard charge direction, when it's encouragement, when it's leading by example, when it's just, hey, the team's rocking and rolling, I just need to stay out of the way and let them do their thing. One of the things I believe in is the importance of people in your life, and this podcast is a bit about networking and building relationships, and the keyword is trust among the people you're with. But essentially it's the same thing. You're building a community, you're building a team, whether it's a network of people that you can reach out to and call on or do business with, or it's creating a team of people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So trust becomes so important. So what are your advice to people for, hey, you're newly promoted to a role, so there's going to be people that think you're undeserving of it, that are now they're reporting to you. There's going to be people that were your equals, or maybe your buddies that you used to go throw back some beers on Friday afternoon after work, the clock ended, and now you're their manager. So how do you build this trust with your team members when you're new to the role? And what's your thoughts on that?
One of the first things that comes to mind is knowing expectations. And I think kind of what you were saying earlier about not like being the dictator as a manager, regardless of your tenure. The closest thing to that for an effective manager, I think, is the one thing you give them, and it can only come from you, other than like a software or a tool or something like that. The one thing that can come from you as a manager is your expectations, and it should come from you. Maybe you don't know that for every person or every situation or every group, but you should be able to tap into somebody, whether it's inside the organization or outside the organization. You should be able to tap into somebody that can help you kind of formulate those expectations and just meet it head on. There's really no substitute for, we always used to say in the manufacturing setting, like if there's an issue and you're a supervisor, run to the problem. Like you literally, whether it's a safety problem, a behavior problem, whatever it is, the chances of you resolving that are the greatest now. The more you wait, the lower the probability is that it's going to be a successful intervention. So that's, kind of, I guess my advice to somebody facing that is be clear about it, and don't make too many assumptions. Don't take things for granted in terms of, oh, well, they know how to act when I'm around because we're buddies or because I said something to them outside of work. I mean, it needs to be professional and it needs to be respectful and you can go a long way in building that trust that you're talking about just with those two things.
Yeah, I think you're right. Is when you say be clear, is you're setting expectations, you're setting boundaries, and you're consistent amongst all team members, not playing favorites. You can be close to people, you can care about their personal lives outside of the office, but it does pay to have clear expectations. Like, hey, this is fun time, this is real time, and everything's when that switch is flipped, it's showtime, and not to keep people with different expectations. So very good. So
Yeah,
go on.
I was just going to say, you nailed it with consistency. I mean, that's, even, and I used to tell my guys that were really needed a lot of that, I knew their potential, but they had a lot of room in between where they were and where they needed to be. Used to tell them, like, you're not going to make all the right choices, but be consistent. Like, even if you're consistently not really hitting the mark, but you're close, like, at least your group knows what to expect. If you're all over the place, then that just starts to breed this anxiety, and that turns into other things. So
Yeah, I think, if you're consistent, you're sticking by your decisions, you're pushing along, but if you do make a mistake, be honest, be open about it, and people respect that. Don't try to cover it up and try to move on. Did you, as you're coming up through the ranks, did you have mentors that kind of gave you guidance? And if you did, what would you recommend to somebody to finding a good mentor as they move into a transition?
I did, but I would say, the caveat to that was I was really fortunate to come into a program that put a lot of emphasis on the first 2 years with the company. You get a lot of attention. You really get exposure to a lot of experience. I mean, be in rooms and in meetings and on calls and just email back and forth with senior leaders that, just naturally don't have the time to invest in people right out of college. So if you find yourself in a situation like that, absolutely, use that. And I tell anybody that's new to a position, regardless of if you're young or not, when you move into a position or join a new team, I think of it in terms of first 90 days, you kind of have this like free pass that you're never going to have again to not really play dumb, but ask questions and be a sponge and challenge things and just really kind of try to bring a new perspective and learn and question things that you may not naturally question. And I think that can go a long way to kind of helping the team, but also helping yourself.
Yeah, that's some good advice. When you're in there the first 90 days, I mean, the people that hired you obviously hired you because they thought you were going to be a contributor, that you could add value to the team. So they're bringing you in for what you know. They're not paying you to do exactly what they had done before. They want your value. But at the same time, you need to realize, how does that value fit within the organization? How does it fit with the team members I'm working for and working with, and the people that are working for me as well? So you're kind of finding a way to balance all that, get that trust built with everybody, and then you start moving. And just anytime you introduce somebody new, management level, to the team, the dynamics change, the culture changes just a little bit. So it's kind of carving out your own niche and your own space within the organization and making your mark on it within their culture, their mark. If you're completely disruptive and that's not what you're hired for, I mean, sometimes people get hired to, be the hatchet man, come in and clean house. But if you're there to add value, it's really finding your niche. So
typically it's more incremental than kind of what you're. And the other thing, just real quick, I would say in terms of mentor, that I guess to bring a little bit more clarity to what I was saying, I ended up having a couple in the company that were very interested in seeing this program be successful and just kind of personality and hobby wise kind of connected with. So that was good. That was valuable. I would say outside of work, I really, for the first, handful of years, only was intentional to connect with probably one person on a regular basis. And I don't think that was the healthiest choice. Like, I think in terms, and whether it's mentors or not, like, I think in terms of, if I could go back to 25-year-old Hunter, I would say be very intentional about like a group of 3, probably no more than 5, that don't necessarily have to be all professionally focused, but just this like kind of inner circle kind of bouncing ideas off of and things like that. I have that now, but I wish I'd have been more intentional about that early on.
I think a lot of us are that same way when they're new to a career. It's like there'll always be time, or you have your personal and you have your business lives, and they're so separate. So you don't even think to intertwine or really reach out mentor. And then you get a little further along in your career and you're like, oh, I really wish I had spent the time, because I'm starting to see the value of it. And these things, they don't happen overnight. So if you start building this network of really good advisors that you learn from at 25, it's going to take you a good 3, 4, 5 years before you really find people you connect with to offer a lot of value. So if you don't wait till you're 30, 35, all of a sudden now you're 35, 40, like, gosh, I should have started that so much sooner and I'd be so much further ahead. So I always encourage people to reach out and spend time early in your career building your network of people you work with in your industry, especially because a lot of times you're coming up in your career and the people that are like acquaintances, they end up like rising up at the same time you do. They might not, maybe they're like a junior salesperson and you're working in a different company, but you guys do business together. Yeah. 5-10 years from now, you're senior level management. They're the senior salesperson. These are the people that you're going to call up when you're in a pinch that you need help with to get stuff done. So it's very important to realize who you're connected with, and over time as it grows. So you have a podcast. Tell us a little bit about the podcast, what it means to you. I know it's not, you're kind of in the same boat as I am with the podcast isn't necessarily the end all be all, but it's another tool to share your voice. But what's your message with the podcast? What could people expect out of it? And what else are you trying to teach people along the way?
So I just started into the second series, and the first series started at the beginning of January this year. So still relatively new. But my approach is to kind of aggregate, a couple or a few different professionals and into kind of a theme. I guess I characterize it sort of in terms of like a sermon series or something like that. But so the first one was a call to action, and that was just more of a play on words and what have you for getting my podcast going, but also for the fact that being a catalyst is action oriented and kind of has that bias for action. So that was part of the message there. And so a couple of professionals, different backgrounds to kind of set the stage for their stories, but also just advice to people that we've been talking about and described. Just started the second series this week, titled Influence, and that I believe that will probably stretch all the way through Q2. There's a chance it may go a little bit beyond, but I'm really trying to keep it like quarter one is this, quarter two is this, quarter three is this, and really just take a lot of different stories, not necessarily ask all the same questions or anything like that, but just kind of thread it into, okay, I can kind of see a pattern, whether it's a realtor or a VP marketing or, whatever the position or industry may be. I could kind of see how things are not necessarily universal, but can be applied, in different ways and looked at from different angles. So that's, I guess, a quick.
That's exciting stuff. And no matter what business, what line of industry you're in, it's really a people's game. And the lessons you learn, they transfer over, how the assembly line is come together, what time the motors start, or if you're selling real estate, you're still managing people, you're still interacting with people, and the lessons tend to be universal. So where can somebody find your podcast? Where can somebody find your content?
Katalyst is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I don't have them all memorized. Overcast and some others, the major ones. And I do have a YouTube channel, which kind of what you were alluding to, like this is not the end all be all. Katalyst is kind of my first platform for building, really still kind of developing my philosophies. And as I talk to people like yourself and just engage in these conversations, it sort of solidifies some stuff I believe, and of course I'm open. I'm an open-minded person, so I'm open to kind of adapting based on someone else's experience or something like that. But the YouTube channel will also have dedicated playlist for very specific topics for if I've got a new hire, this or basically just like, hey, here's a quick training module, because there are a lot of companies, big and small, out there that are just starving for something that's kind of put together. It doesn't have to be fancy.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on both sides of it, where way too many resources, not enough resources, and I think that'll be a good platform for me to start building some of that out. I hope to kind of expand that and formalize it a little bit, but that's kind of where it's at now. So I'm on all the major podcasts, YouTube channel. I'm trying to be present on social media. I'm really not. I'm really not naturally just on my phone. Somebody convinced me to really dive into Instagram a couple weeks ago, so I've been trying to embrace that. LinkedIn, I've really been spending a lot of time on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The last 4 months, and I'll say this real quick, if there's anybody listening that, well, let me tell a story first. And I'm almost ashamed to say this, but I was actually let go in October from my previous role, and I really am mad at myself for letting my network go cold. Like, I probably had maybe 400 connections. I've been on LinkedIn for, I don't know, 15 years. I don't even know how long it is. Like, I've been on LinkedIn since the early days. And, I had gotten to the point, honestly, where the only thing I viewed LinkedIn was it was a digital resume, and it was a place where these annoying recruiters would reach out and tell me they've got somebody to fill my engineering spot.
Yeah.
And it really just kind of created this bad taste and really an unhealthy perspective. And so when I was let go, that was one of the first naturally places to go look for jobs. And then I start consuming some of the content, going through the feed and trying to connect with people. And I'm like, man, I really put myself way behind where I could be at this stage of my career, just having better connections, having a healthier, view of possibilities and just getting content out there and stuff like that. So I would definitely advise anybody that's like I was, where I was rejecting connection requests like that. Like that is that, I hate that I went through that, but I've really been intentional about it the last few months. I think LinkedIn is a fantastic platform.
It really is. I think you're in the same boat a lot of people are, where you realized you didn't take advantage of some of the opportunities that were there all along. And once you realize it, it's like this epiphany. And yeah, sure, we all wish we could have done it more back in the day and done more, that we'd be so much further ahead. But I think that awareness that what we missed out on will drive us to see future opportunities more clearly and be willing to, not hesitate. And I've been this way a million times, where it's like, hey, I'm not good enough to do that. I'm not the right person for that role. And then you say, like, well, why not me? Like, why can't I be that person that takes advantage of opportunities when they present themselves? Why does other people do it and other people don't? And it's really just a matter of being somebody that goes, I'm going to do it, versus somebody that says, I'll wait, I'll see, maybe next time. So awesome. Well, that's Katalyst with the K. I want to make sure you all get that so that you can find it. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you're doing. I think it's amazing. You're putting these series together. Like you said, a lot of companies don't have resources for a big human resources department and training and education. And they don't have the money to pay big dollars to buy the programs or send somebody away to training and the good stuff of people going, hey, you're an individual contributor to a manager. That's a huge change in your role within an organization. And until you've been in that change, like, you don't understand like how different it all of a sudden becomes in like one day. And having those tools, those resources available, that you can be groomed as you're making your transition, or even if you've just recently made a transition, or you've been doing it for 50 years, you can go back and there's going to be some value you can learn and take it away. So
yeah,
awesome.
absolutely. Yeah.
Well, great.
And I think, I guess I lost my train of thought. You were, I was just thinking, like, in terms of using the podcast platform, like I don't necessarily, I keep my expectations in check, right? I'm an ambitious person, and I want it to be successful. I think I'm still defining successful, but I don't necessarily expect it to be some crazy popular, but at the end of the day, like, what would make me the happiest is that it's meaningful and it creates kind of a community of people that are going through similar and can kind of bring some of those people together. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I'm hoping that it can kind of facilitate some of that. And
well, you're on the right path there. If you have a vision of what you want it to be, like you said, how do you define success? It's not always black and white, yes or no. Like, right. I achieved this. Okay, well then what? What's next? But when you visualize it as a community of people that are finding value, finding benefit, and learning from it, and having an impact in people's lives, I think that's a true measure of success. Whether it's one person, 100 people, or 100,000 people, it doesn't matter. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Anybody that's listening, if you could, check out Hunter's page. The links will be in the show notes. And if you found value in this episode, please let one or two other people know about it. So thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell two friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.